The United Institute of Peace just won in court against Trump and DOGE, Judge Howell issuing a 100-page opinion laying out the unlawful actions Trump and DOGE took in order to try to dismantle and take over the United States Institute of Peace. My name is Dina Doll with the Legal AF channel. Let's break this down. I mean, the irony is not lost. The fact that we need peace more than ever. This institute was created back during the Reagan administration, and here we are at war on multiple fronts. Trump's magic negotiating powers, evidently not so magic, as none of them are resolved. We even have maybe more conflict having broke out between India and Pakistan. Not sure what's happening yet still with that. The end of the day, this Institute of Peace, you would think would be perhaps the most uncontroversial agency ever. It was bipartisan support. It was initially created, and it's funded not just by the government, but by private funding as well. Perhaps that combination of private and government funds that Republicans always talk about wanting to have. But in this case, DOGE and Trump wanting to get rid of it. And they do it in a way with law enforcement. The irony of it here, this is an institute based in peace, and Trump and DOGE using 3 different federal and local law enforcements in order to gain access to the building in order to do like a physical takeover of this institute. So the judge just laying this out in this opinion, first of all, him talking about legally why they don't have access to the building, an ability to take over it. The fact is because this is both government and privately funded, and because of the way Congress created this institute, it was always meant to be more of a think tank, a cooperation between the government and private sector. It does not have any power. This is why it's not part of the executive branch. The judge points out this fact. It doesn't have, it's not as if, in all of these other agencies within the executive branch, the power has been designated, right? Like by the Secretary of State, and the power is designated within that. There is no designated power to this institute. The institute is really about developing research, training, policies, discussing ideas about how to have a more peaceful world. And so this isn't about some sort of power. And because they don't have power, that in itself shows it's not a part of the executive branch. And of course, as Trump and DOGE did with all the other things they did with the other agencies that were part of the executive branch, they didn't even follow the basic rules for how to dismiss the agency executives. And so it was not even a close decision. But perhaps the most just jarring part of the order is his description of what they did in order to try to gain access. They show up there on a Friday, it's March 14th, and they show up there with FBI agents, and DOGE contacted their lawyer and said they don't have jurisdiction, and so don't let them come in, essentially. And so they didn't let the FBI come in. And that, of course, was not good enough for DOGE. They then, instead of trying to have the attorneys talk to each other, maybe try to go through court if they felt like law was on their side, right? No, they instead kind of double down on this using force, using the law enforcement. The DC USAO criminal division chief ended up becoming involved, and they called the outside counsel of the United States Institute of Peace in order to seek access to the building and resources for unnamed individuals, and said that there was, quote, a suspicion that USIP may be engaging in criminal behavior. Here you have a criminal division chief for the United States government basically trying to threaten, saying, we need this access because we think there might be criminal behavior. This is beyond, the executive order wasn't good enough. Now they're trying to use some sort of threats here in terms of there being criminal behavior. That same official then calls again to say he was requesting that representatives for Secretaries Rubio and Hegseth be able to inspect the books and records. Now basically trying to call upon the power of the Secretary of Rubio and Hegseth, again, putting pressure, intimidation onto the USIP employees, essentially, and officials. The outside counsel informed that DC USAO official that he would be happy to facilitate such access upon a formal written request. Then the DC USA official stated that unnamed representatives of Secretary Hegseth would be at the USIP headquarters buildings the next day and would expect access to the USIP information systems. He threatened to investigate criminally anyone who obstructed their access. I mean, this is the lengths they went to access the Institute of Peace, threatening criminal prosecution, essentially. So while this is going on, the O'Brien, who was like the chief security of the United States Institute of Peace, suggested that they suspend the contract that they had with a private security firm, Intercon, because they were worried that DOGE or the FBI would coerce those employees to gaining access. And evidently that's exactly what happened. 4 employees of Intercon then arrived at USIP headquarters. And even though their badges were deactivated, one of them, a 5th one, came with a physical key that had not yet been given back to USIP. The outside counsel for USIP informed them that they were trespassing. And this is in the order. It goes on to say the Intercon staff proceeded to USIP's arms room, where USIP's firearms are stored. Fearing a violent standoff, again, at the Institute of Peace, O'Brien and the others initiated a building lockdown and called the DC Metropolitan Police Department. So the Metropolitan Police Department, this order goes on in detail, just laying out the really stunning facts of what happened. When the Metropolitan Police Department came, they ended up escorting outside their USIP's outside counsel and the security chief without allowing them to retrieve their belongings. And then the police department allowed in behind them DOGE officials and also 2 diplomatic security officers from the Department of State arrived and entered the building. And then O'Brien, the USIP security official, observed the Metropolitan Police Department retrieve lock-picking equipment from a vehicle and gain entrance through a building door on Constitution Avenue to the United States Institute of Peace. So they finally gained access, and the judge's order says 2 days later, DOGE officials were able to access the USIP computer systems and then attempted to cut off personnel access to funds and were suspected of dumping financial records into shred bins. DOGE officials proceeded to strip USIP logos and monikers from the walls inside of the building. So all of this, the judge really pointing out, this has all happened after DOGE was informed that their own USIP's lawyers found DOGE to have no legal basis to enter into the building. And rather than go to court, this is, you think you have a lawful right? Go ahead. This is why we have justice system. You go to court and you figure it out. But instead of that, they enlist the FBI. They enlist this criminal division. At the Justice Department, they enlist, they name drop, let's say, perhaps some of the most powerful cabinet officials, right? Because they have at their disposal the Department of Defense and the Pentagon and the Secretary of State, trying to gain access in this way to this peaceful institute. The irony is not lost. This is what Trump and DOGE, this is like an epitome of what they did everywhere. And then even the Institute of Peace, like the law enforcement failing them, the Metropolitan Police Department, when they came, helping DOGE and not them. So we will continue to keep you updated on this story and the many others that are coming out of the Trump regime. My name is Dina Doll with the Legal AF channel. Be sure to free subscribe so you do not miss any of them.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.